That morning, pale sunlight filtered through the bare branches of winter trees, casting a golden glow on the small suburban street in Portland, Oregon. The sidewalk was still covered in a thick layer of snow from the previous night, glistening in the early light. On the corner of the street stood Sweet Mornings, a cozy little bakery that had become a beloved morning stop for locals. Inside its warm interior, the gentle aroma of butter, cinnamon, and baked apples filled the air, warding off the chill outside. Lily Harper, the young baker, was intently finishing a fresh batch of apple tarts. Her nimble fingers moved swiftly as she drizzled caramel over each tart. With her light brown hair neatly tied back and a cream-colored apron around her waist, Lily exuded an air of warmth and diligence. She loved her work, not just because it brought her joy, but because creating these pastries allowed her to spread a little happiness to others. As sunlight began to stream through the windows, the first customers of the day stepped into the bakery. Lily greeted them with a smile, her green eyes radiating friendliness. Everything unfolded as it usually did, until a small sound disrupted the peaceful atmosphere. A faint bark came from outside the shop, drawing Lily's attention. At first, she thought it was just a dog barking in the distance, but as the sound persisted, she sensed something unusual. Wiping her hands on her apron, Lily walked toward the front door. As she opened it, a sharp gust of morning wind swept in, making her shiver. And there, on the snow-covered steps, she saw a small, fluffy dog trembling and curled up. Beside the dog stood two young children, twins, a boy and a girl. They looked no older than 3 or 4, both dressed in worn-out coats that offered little protection against the cold. Their cheeks were flushed red from the icy air, and their wide eyes stared at Lily with a mix of hope and uncertainty. Lily's heart tightened. The children and the little dog looked as though they had been wandering through the cold all night. Without hesitation, she knelt down to their eye level. "Are you all right? Are you cold?" she asked gently, her voice soft and reassuring, careful not to scare them. The children didn't answer, but their growling stomachs spoke for them. The little dog let out a faint whimper, its small black eyes filled with desperation. Lily offered a tender smile, straightened up, and held the door open. "Come inside. I'll make you something to eat," she said warmly. The twins exchanged glances, as if silently asking each other for permission, then clasped hands tightly and stepped inside, the little dog trailing behind them. Lily led them to a small table near the fireplace, where sunlight streamed in and quickly disappeared into the kitchen. She returned with 2 steaming cups of milk and a few warm muffins, along with a small bowl of water for the dog. As the children devoured the food hungrily, Lily sat across from them, observing discreetly. Both were thin, their pale blonde hair disheveled, and their faces streaked with dirt, clear signs that they had braved the harsh cold for far too long. They were far too young to fend for themselves in such a brutal winter. Lily couldn't help but wonder, where were their parents? How had they ended up wandering alone? And why wasn't anyone looking for them? While Lily was lost in thought, the kitchen door behind her swung open, and Mrs. Martha, the owner of the bakery, stepped in. A middle-aged woman with her gray hair neatly tied in a bun, Mrs. Martha had sharp eyes framed by thin glasses. Her gaze quickly landed on the 2 children and the small dog sitting at the table. Her face darkened immediately, and she placed her hands firmly on her hips, her cold voice slicing through the warm atmosphere. "Lily Harper, what do you think you're doing? Why are there strangers and a dog in my shop?" Lily looked up, her green eyes flickering with hesitation but showing no sign of retreat. She stood up, meeting Mrs. Martha's stern gaze directly. "Mrs. Martha, they're just 2 kids and a little dog. They're hungry and cold. I couldn't leave them out there," she explained, her voice soft but resolute. Mrs. Martha crossed her arms, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You know the rules of this bakery. We're not a shelter or a charity. I understand your good intentions, Lily, but this could harm the shop's image." Lily glanced at the 2 children. They were still eating quietly, not daring to look up, as if even the slightest wrong glance might get them thrown back out into the cold. The little dog, unaware of the full situation, sat still, its anxious eyes darting around the room. The sight made Lily's chest tighten. "Mrs. Martha?" Lily turned back to her, her tone calm but imploring. "If this causes trouble, I'll take responsibility. But please, think about it. If you were in my position, could you just turn a blind eye? Mrs. Martha held Lily's gaze for a long moment. Something flickered in her sharp eyes, a struggle between reason and emotion. Finally, she sighed, shaking her head. Lily, I understand where you're coming from, but if you keep letting your emotions dictate your actions, you won't have a job here for long. Consider this your final warning. If you want to help them, do it somewhere else, not in my bakery. Lily bit her lip, swallowing her disappointment. She knew Mrs. Martha wasn't a bad person, but she was rigid, and this bakery was her livelihood. After a brief pause, Mrs. Martha turned and walked away, leaving Lily standing there with an ache in her chest. When Mrs. Martha had gone, Lily returned to the table, forcing a smile to reassure the children. She sat down and gently asked, "What are your names? Where are your parents?" The children paused their eating, exchanging uncertain glances. The boy, slightly older than the girl, hesitated before answering in a voice so quiet that Lily had to lean closer to hear him. "We're Max and Ellie. We don't know where our parents are. We're lost." Lost? Lily's brow furrowed, her heart sinking. Ellie, the smaller of the two with messy blonde hair, looked up, her bright blue eyes brimming with tears. "I just remember being in a big park," Ellie said, her voice trembling. "There were lots of people, and..." Lily could feel the fear in Ellie's trembling voice. The two children clearly had no idea what had happened to them, and they were far too young to navigate their way home alone. She couldn't let them fend for themselves. Glancing at the clock, Lily realized she had a few hours before the bakery closed, but her mind was already made up. "All right," Lily said, her tone gentle but firm. "You'll stay here for now. When my shift is over, I'll take you to the police station. They'll help find your parents." Max nodded, seeming to trust Lily, though worry still lingered in his eyes. Lily smiled softly and gently ruffled his messy blonde hair. As time passed, Lily went about her work, serving customers while keeping an eye on the two children and the little dog. Every time she glanced their way, she felt a mix of compassion and responsibility swell in her chest. When the bell signaled the end of the day, Lily tidied up, put on her thick coat, and prepared to take the three of them outside. Lily walked with the two children and the small dog toward the police station, reassuring them along the way to ease their fears. She wrapped an extra scarf around Ellie's neck and pulled Max's coat tighter to shield him from the wind. The little dog trotted close at Lily's heels, letting out occasional soft whimpers as if expressing its gratitude. Their footprints stretched through the thick snow, leading them to the local police station, where the red and blue neon lights blinked like a beacon of safety. Once inside, Lily explained the situation to the officer on duty, a tall man with a kind face who listened attentively. After asking a few questions, he nodded and said, "Thank you for bringing them here, Miss Harper. We'll do our best to identify the children and locate their family. In the meantime, we'll arrange temporary housing for them." At those words, Ellie and Max immediately burst into tears. Ellie clung to Lily's sleeve, sobbing, "I don't want to go anywhere. I'm scared." Max, though trying to appear brave, couldn't hide his fear. Shaking his head vigorously, he clung to Lily's hand as if afraid she would leave them. "We want to stay with you, Lily," he said, his voice trembling. Lily saw the officer's discomfort as he looked at her, seemingly expecting a solution. Seeing the tear-streaked faces of the children, Lily felt her heart ache. She knelt down, wiping Ellie's tears, and whispered, "Don't cry. I'm not leaving you." Then she turned to the officer. "Could I take them home with me temporarily? I'll look after them until you find their family." The officer hesitated, but after seeing the children's desperate attachment to Lily and the determination in her eyes, he finally nodded. "All right, but you'll need to leave your contact information. We'll stay in touch." After signing the necessary paperwork, Lily left the station with the two children and the little dog. On the way home, despite the late hour and the biting cold, Max and Ellie seemed to relax. Their steps were lighter now that their small hands were firmly held in Lily's. Lily lived in a small apartment on the second floor of an old building, about a 10-minute walk from the bakery. Her apartment consisted of a modest living room that doubled as a kitchen, a single bedroom, and a cramped bathroom. The furnishings were simple, mostly second-hand items she had picked up from thrift stores, but the space was always clean and cozy. Lily didn't have much money, but she had done her best to create a comfortable home. She had grown up in a hard-working immigrant family. Her parents had worked tirelessly to support her and her younger brother, but a car accident had taken them away when Lily was just 17. From that moment, she became her brother's guardian, juggling multiple jobs to support them both while she attended college. When her brother graduated and earned a scholarship to study abroad, Lily decided to forgo her own education to focus on working. She moved to Portland, found a job at Sweet Morning's Bakery, and built a simple but independent life for herself. With all her past experiences, Lily deeply understood the feeling of being abandoned, of having no one to rely on. Perhaps it was this understanding that made it impossible for her to turn a blind eye to Max and Ellie. When they reached her apartment, Lily quickly prepared a simple meal for the children, steaming chicken soup and some bread. She gently cleaned their faces and hands, then pulled warm blankets from her closet to cover them as they sat on her old sofa. The little dog, now clean after being wiped down with a damp towel, curled up obediently at their feet. "Miss Lily," Max called softly as she returned to the kitchen to tidy up. "Do you think our parents will find us?" Lily paused, turning back to him with a warm smile, her eyes full of reassurance. "Of course, Max. Your parents are looking for you, just as you're waiting for them. Everything will be all right." Ellie yawned, rubbing her eyes, and rested her head on Max's shoulder. Within minutes, both children had fallen asleep, their small faces relaxing, free from the tension that had marked them earlier. Lily sat down beside them with a quiet sigh. Watching the two children and the little dog peacefully sleeping, she couldn't help but feel she had stepped into an unexpected and strange story. Yet, there was not a single trace of regret in her heart. Outside, the wind still howled, but within Lily's small apartment, the warmth of human kindness had chased away the winter's chill. Max and Ellie were not ordinary children. They were the children of Richard Bennett, a renowned billionaire in the tech industry. Richard was the founder and CEO of a major tech corporation headquartered in Seattle, known not just for his immense wealth, but also for his brilliance and innovation. However, his life was far from perfect behind the scenes. Richard's wife, Evelyn, had died in a plane crash when Max and Ellie were just 2 years old. Evelyn was the only woman Richard had ever truly loved, and her death left an irreplaceable void in his heart. Stricken by grief, Richard threw himself into his work, using it as an escape from his emotions. He spent most of his time traveling for business, expanding his empire, and pursuing ambitious tech projects. This left him little time to be with his children, no matter how much he wished he could. To ensure Max and Ellie wouldn't feel neglected, Richard hired the best housekeepers and nannies to care for them. But no amount of effort could substitute for a mother's presence. About a year ago, Richard met Amanda, a stunning and charming woman, at a charity gala. Amanda quickly captivated him, not only with her looks, but also with how she portrayed herself as a loving, family-oriented woman who adored children. At first, Amanda seemed devoted to Max and Ellie. She often took them on outings, bought them expensive clothes, and showered them with sweet words in Richard's presence. But it was all part of an elaborate act. Amanda was in truth a cunning gold digger, and her sole aim was Richard's vast fortune. When Richard wasn't home, her true nature came to light. Amanda treated Max and Ellie as burdens. She frequently scolded and snapped at them over trivial matters. If they didn't follow her orders, she would resort to terrifying threats. "If you don't behave, I'll send you to an orphanage, and your dad will never come back for you." These threats terrified the children, keeping them from telling their father about her cruel behavior. Over time, Amanda became increasingly careless and irresponsible in caring for the children. She often left them to play alone in the house or outside, while she busied herself with phone calls and extravagant shopping trips. One day, during an outing to the park, Amanda was so engrossed in texting on her phone that she failed to notice when Max and Ellie wandered off and became lost. When Amanda realized the children were missing, she panicked and frantically searched the park. However, the park was vast, and her efforts proved futile. Afraid that reporting to the police or informing Richard would expose her negligence and ruin his trust in her, Amanda chose to stay silent. She pretended as if nothing had happened, hoping the children would either be found by someone else or somehow find their way back home. Meanwhile, Max and Ellie, unsure of what to do, had only their little dog as a companion. The children wandered through the park all day and then onto quiet streets trying to find their way home. They didn't know where they were, didn't know how to contact their father, and were too frightened to trust strangers because of Amanda's threats. That night, they huddled together in a hidden corner near a store, keeping close for warmth, with their little dog curled up beside them. The next day, exhausted and starving, they stumbled upon Lily's bakery, setting the stage for a new chapter in their story. Max and Ellie could never have imagined that on that cold morning, they would meet a kind woman willing to protect and care for them as if they were her own family. Meanwhile, Richard remained unaware that his children were missing, and Amanda continued her facade as if nothing were wrong. But the truth, like a tightly coiled thread, was about to unravel and bring everyone together. That evening, as Max and Ellie slept soundly on the small sofa in Lily's living room, she sat quietly at the kitchen table, her gaze drifting out the snow-covered window. The glow of the streetlights filtered into the cozy room, but her mind was weighed down with unanswered questions. Who were these children? Where were their parents? And why was no one looking for them? Lily decided not to press them for more details that night. She wanted them to feel safe and rested first. The next morning, as the gentle sunlight poured through the window, Lily heard giggles coming from the living room. She stepped out to find Ellie playing with the little dog, while Max sat quietly, watching his sister with a faint smile that still carried traces of caution. Lily sat down beside them, smiling warmly. "Good morning, kids. Did you sleep well?" Ellie nodded, her messy blonde hair resembling a little golden cloud. "Yes, very well. Miss Lily, can we stay here forever?" Her innocent voice carried a note of worry. Lily hesitated for a moment. She couldn't lie to her. "I'll do everything I can to help you find your parents. But first, you need to tell me what happened. How did you get here? What's your story?" Max looked at Lily, his serious blue eyes meeting hers. After a brief pause, he began speaking in a small but steady voice. "Our dad is Richard Bennett. He's very busy and works a lot. When he's away, Amanda, his girlfriend, takes care of us. But she's not as nice as she pretends to be when Dad is around." Ellie chimed in, her little face suddenly darkening. "She's scary. She doesn't like us. She yells at us a lot and says if we're bad, she'll send us to a place where nobody loves us. I'm really scared of her." Her voice broke, and tears welled up in her eyes. Lily's heart ached as she placed a comforting hand on Ellie's shoulder. "It's okay, Ellie. You're safe here. Nobody can hurt you anymore." Max continued, his small hands clenched into fists. "One day, Amanda took us to the park. She wasn't paying attention. She was on her phone the whole time. Ellie and I went to play, but when we came back, she was gone. We couldn't find her anywhere. I think she left us on purpose." Lily listened in silence, a surge of anger building within her chest. She couldn't believe an adult could be so heartless toward children. But the most important thing now was to reunite them with their father, who, she believed, must be worried sick about their disappearance. "All right, Max, Ellie," Lily said with determination in her voice. "We're going to find your dad. I'll call the police and tell them what you've shared. They'll help us locate him. But first, you have to believe that everything will be okay." Ellie nodded hesitantly, her fear lingering, while Max maintained a calm demeanor, trying to protect his younger sister. After cleaning up from breakfast, Lily began planning her next steps. She called the police station and reported the new details. The officer on duty sounded astonished upon hearing Richard Bennett's name, knowing the disappearance of his children would create a massive stir if made public. He assured Lily that they would immediately contact the necessary authorities to verify the information and reach out to Richard. As Lily ended the call, she glanced back at Max and Ellie, who were sitting together on the sofa with their dog. She promised herself that no matter how complicated things might get, she would see this through. The children had already endured enough, and she wasn't about to let them face it alone. Meanwhile, Lily continued caring for the two children. She took them to a nearby park to let them relax and play with the little dog, hoping the fresh air would help soothe their minds. Watching Ellie laugh under the sunlight and Max standing at a distance, keeping a watchful eye on his little sister like a responsible older brother, Lily couldn't help but feel her heart warm. But deep down, she knew this story was far from over. Amanda would certainly not want the truth to come out. And Richard, a loving yet distant father, would undoubtedly be shaken to learn what his children had endured. Lily wasn't sure what more she could do, but she knew one thing for certain: she would not abandon Max and Ellie. While Lily, Max, and Ellie enjoyed a peaceful morning at the park, hundreds of miles away, Richard Bennett was immersed in work at an important meeting in New York. Reports for a new tech project were spread out across the table, and the bright lights of the conference room couldn't mask the fatigue etched on his face. Richard had been away from home for nearly 3 weeks, and a vague sense of longing for his children tugged at him. However, as always, he pushed the feeling aside, reassuring himself that Amanda was taking good care of Max and Ellie. His phone buzzed. Glancing at the screen, Richard's eyes lit up at the sight of a number from Oregon. He excused himself from the meeting and stepped outside to answer. "Mr. Bennett, this is the Portland Police Department. We need to speak with you regarding your children, Max and Ellie," came the officer's voice on the other end. Richard froze, a wave of anxiety washing over him. "My children? Is something wrong? They're supposed to be with Amanda." The officer hesitated before replying. "Sir, your children were found lost and are currently being cared for by a woman named Lily Harper. We're still investigating, but it appears that the children have not been receiving proper care from Amanda." Richard was silent for a moment, trying to process the information. Anxiety turned to anger. "I'll be on the next flight to Portland," he said quickly and hung up. Back in Portland, Lily received a call from the police, informing her that they had contacted Richard and that he would be arriving later that evening. She felt a wave of relief, but also a tinge of nervousness. She didn't know how Richard would react upon seeing his children again, or whether he would recognize the serious issues stemming from his choice of a partner. That evening, Lily sat on the sofa with Max and Ellie, telling them cheerful stories to calm their nerves. When a knock came at the door, her heart raced. She stood up, walked to the door, and opened it to find a tall man in a sharp suit, his face haggard but his eyes filled with determination. "Mr. Bennett?" Lily asked, though she already knew it was him. Richard nodded, his gaze immediately sweeping past Lily to search for his children. The moment he saw Max and Ellie sitting on the sofa, he said nothing. He rushed over and knelt before them, pulling them into a tight embrace. "Max, Ellie." His voice broke as he held them close. "I'm so sorry I've left you alone for far too long. I'm so sorry." Ellie burst into tears, wrapping her small arms around his neck. "Daddy, we missed you so much." Max didn't cry, but he gripped his father's hand tightly, as if to ensure he wasn't just a dream. Lily stood quietly, not wanting to intrude on the reunion, but Richard quickly turned to her, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Miss Harper, I don't know how to thank you enough. If it weren't for you, I don't even want to imagine what could have happened to my children." Lily gave him a gentle smile. "I just did what anyone should do. Max and Ellie are wonderful kids. I only wanted them to be safe." After calming the children, Richard invited Lily to sit down and share more details about what had happened. Lily recounted the entire story, including everything Max and Ellie had told her about Amanda's treatment of them. Richard's face darkened as he listened, his expression shifting from pain to anger. "I trusted her too much," he said, his voice low but filled with restrained fury. "She made me believe she cared for the kids, but now I see it clearly. She only wanted my wealth. She never cared about Max and Ellie." He lowered his head as though blaming himself, but Lily spoke up, her tone gentle yet firm. "Mr. Bennett, what matters now is that your children are safe. You need to focus on them, spend time with them. Everything else can be dealt with later." Richard looked up at her and nodded in agreement. He knew she was right. "Miss Harper, I owe you more than I can ever repay. If there's anything you need, anything at all, just let me know. I'll do whatever it takes." Lily simply shook her head. "I don't need anything, Mr. Bennett. Just take good care of Max and Ellie, that's all I ask." Richard was silent for a moment before speaking again, his voice filled with sincerity. "I won't forget this, Lily, and I'm sure Max and Ellie won't either." Max and Ellie sat beside their father, their eyes shining with trust as they looked at Lily. They knew that, because of her, they had found their loving father again, and perhaps a new beginning for their family. Months after the reunion, life began to change for the better for Max, Ellie, and even Richard. Once the truth about Amanda came to light, Richard didn't hesitate to end his relationship with her. Amanda tried to defend herself and even threatened to tarnish his reputation. But Richard was prepared. He presented all evidence of her negligence to his legal team, ensuring she could never return to their lives. With Amanda out of the picture, Richard started dedicating more time to Max and Ellie. He adjusted his work schedule, cutting back on long business trips so he could be there for his children more often. But what surprised him the most was the bond that began to form between him and Lily. After Richard took the children home, he stayed in frequent contact with Lily to express his gratitude and provide updates. At first, their conversations were brief and centered around Max and Ellie, but over time, they discovered they had more in common than they had expected. Lily wasn't just kind, she was strong and independent, qualities Richard deeply admired. She always prioritized Max and Ellie's well-being, and this touched him profoundly. Every time she visited the children, his home was filled with warmth and laughter. A warmth he thought he'd never feel again. Max and Ellie seemed to sense something special growing between their father and Lily. They began asking innocent questions like, "Can Miss Lily come here every day?" Or, "Dad, can we call Miss Lily Mom?" Their questions made both Richard and Lily blush, but they also planted new thoughts in their hearts. One beautiful spring afternoon, as flowers bloomed and gentle sunlight bathed the garden, Richard decided to propose to Lily. During a picnic with Max and Ellie, he pulled out a small ring box, looked directly into Lily's eyes, and said, "Lily, you've brought something to this family that I never thought I'd find again. Love and warmth. You didn't just save Max and Ellie, you saved me too. I want us to be a real family. Will you marry me?" Max and Ellie cheered with excitement, and Lily, overwhelmed with emotion, could only nod as tears shimmered in her eyes. She whispered, "Yes." The wedding was a warm and intimate celebration, attended by close friends and family. Max and Ellie proudly served as the flower girl and ring bearer, holding Lily's hands as she walked down the aisle. Even the little dog was there, wagging its tail as if sharing in the joy. After the wedding, their lives began a new chapter. Lily officially became Max and Ellie's mother. Her love and care helped the children, once deeply scarred, fully heal. Richard learned to balance his work with family life, constantly reminding himself how lucky he was to have Lily and the children in his life. Their once cold and empty house now overflowed with laughter, warm meals, and bedtime stories. Max and Ellie finally had something they once thought impossible: a true mother who loved them unconditionally. And Lily, an ordinary woman, had become the heart of an extraordinary family. A family where they would all continue to write their happily ever after together. Thank you for taking the time to hear today's story. If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming meaningful stories. Your support is our biggest motivation to continue bringing you heartfelt and inspiring content. See you in the next video.